For phase 4 in our platform game, we're going to add a couple features. One feature is that the player is going to be able to climb vines up and down the screen. And another feature is we're going to add in kind of stepped ramps. So as it is right now, you can go side to side and you can jump up onto platforms. But if you encountered a series of steps which moved up by 8 pixels at a shot, you'd get stuck going like you'd have to jump your way up them. But we're going to set it up so that you can just walk onto a ramp and the player will just kind of climb up. So ladders and ramps, and then we're also going to give you some control over the viewport, and that refers to the window that the player sees the game through. And you can control that and you can limit that, and that can add some factors to the game. It can add a little bit of suspense because you don't let the player see the whole room all at once. Some people like that, some people don't. You can use it as a tool, and it's kind of an optional thing, but we're going to set it up in the game. You can modify the numbers later. Okay, first step we need to do is import a bunch of sprites. So let's go add sprite. And the first one that we'll get here is called block H. Make sure you have remove background unchecked. This is another one of those invisible sprites, but since we're going to be dealing in half blocks, we want the block horizontal and block vertical, which are just 8 pixels on one aspect of it, so that we can fit some of our graphics a little better. So block H and remove background. SPR underscore block H. And I don't think we need to modify anything on this, so click OK. We'll do the same for block V. Make sure remove background's unchecked. Click open and SPR underscore block V. Okay. The next sprite we'll grab is the climbing sprite, which is character climbing. We do want to remove background, so check that box. Click open. There's not a series of sub images. It's just a regular old single sprite, so she'll just look like that when she climbs. We do want to do our usual turning off of precise collision checking and check separate collision masks. Go to modify mask, choose manual, and the numbers we'll use on this one is 7 for left. We'll use 23 for the right. For the top is 2, and for the bottom is 31, and that's the same as the left and right sprite images. So all 3 of our images for the character have the same bounding box, and that's kind of a principle to keep in mind to avoid collision problems when your character moves from one image to the next. Click OK, and let's load in the ladder sprite, which is a green box. I guess we do want to remove the background on this one. They set it up a little differently. Remove background, click open, and we'll call this one SPR underscore ladder, and click OK. Let's go ahead and set up our block V and block H objects. So obj underscore block V, and we'll grab the sprite for block V. And for a parent, we're going to make it a subset of block there. So block V and block H are going to be children of block, and that means we don't need to set up any events or whatever. They get treated the same as block. So we'll click OK. We'll do the same for block H, obj underscore block H. Grab the block H sprite and set its parent to block and click OK. Let's grab the ladder. Let's do obj underscore ladder and grab the ladder sprite. This one's not going to be visible. Oh, I think we need to set that up on block V and block H as well. It's not visible, and it doesn't need a parent or anything. It doesn't need any action, so click OK. Let's go and go back into block V and uncheck visible. Go back into block H and do the same. All right. Now we can start working on our character, and in fact almost everything we do today in phase 4 is just in the character object itself, except for when we set up how to use a view, but everything will be on the character aside from the view. So let's go and open our character up, and we're going to go into our step event, and right now we're doing a couple things. We're checking if the character is in the air. We do this process. And we also check if we need to limit the vertical speed. If the character falls faster than 12 pixels per second, I think is how it's measured, and then we'll limit it back to 12. We also need to check whether the character's on a ladder, because if they're flying through the air and they happen to touch a ladder, we're going to assume they can just grab the ladder and start climbing. So we need to be checking that, and if the ladder is there, if they're touching a ladder, we need to turn off gravity, and we need to change the character sprite. So let's drag another comment out at the bottom here, and this comment will say check whether on a ladder. And so we're going to check for a collision, check for an object, and the object we're going to look for is a ladder at 0, 0 relative to the player. And if we find that ladder, we'll drag out a couple of blocks here. We're going to first of all set the gravity to direction 270 and a value of 0. Next, we're going to set the vertical speed to 0. Actually, let's go back. I don't think it matters a whole lot, but the tutorial that we're using as a basis for this from Yo-Yo Games wants to check the variable rather than just use set v-speed, so set variable speed. So we're going to go to set variable. I need to get this scrolled down here. Set variable, and we're looking at v-speed, and we're going to set it to 0. And again, you probably can use this item here, but since the tutorial uses this one, I'm going to stick with how they're doing it. We need to set the sprite for the character. So go back to main one, and we're going to set the sprite, and we're going to change it to character climbing. Oops, I didn't name mine correctly. Subimage 0, speed of 1 is fine. And click OK. And I'm going to jump out of here for a second and rename that. I think I did this in the last tutorial also. SPR character climbing. Okay. And so if I go back into object character, we check this, and it updates the name there. Okay. So if the character is on a ladder, then that should be adjusted properly. Okay, the next thing we need to change is on the keyboard event for left. And what we're going to do now is, if they're moving left, we change the sprite, and we check to see if the position we're looking at is collision free. And if it's collision free, we want to move ahead. However, if there's a collision there, but it's a low-level collision, in other words, it's like half a block high, we want to be able to treat that like a step that we can climb up onto. So normally, if they run across a wall or a block in their way, they stop and they can't move. But if it's a short block, if it's only 8 pixels tall, we want to be able to step up onto it, because that's going to be a ramp or a series of steps. So if this position is collision free, do this. But we're going to add an else in here, so let's go down to control and drag out the else, put a couple of blocks in. If it's not collision free, if there's a collision, let's find out what kind of collision it is. So let's say we're going to check for another collision, or check empty, check if it's collision free. But notice in the last one we checked relative position -4, 0. In this case, we're going to check a relative position, but it's going to be -4, -8. All right, and so -4 is left, so we're checking 4 pixels to our left. We're also checking 8 pixels above the floor. And if that is collision free, that means we have a collision, but it's a short collision, and right above that collision is free, so we can step up onto that. So -4, -8, relative. Click OK. And if that is collision free, then in that case we want to move the character there. So let's go to move and jump to position, and it's a -4, -8, relative. Okay, so we'll jump right up onto that. And for the right keyboard, we're going to do the same test. So let's move over to the right key. And once again, we'll go to Control. We'll check for an empty position at -4, -8, relative. Sorry, I forgot the else. Drag an else on top of that. And if this one is collision free, then we want to go ahead and jump the character to that spot. And actually it's +4, -8, relative. Sorry, not paying attention here. So this one is +4. -4 is left. We're doing right this time, so +4 is to the right. But we're still checking up, so it's still -8 on the y-axis. Okay, so that takes care of left and right. That should handle our ramps. Now we also want to check the up key, because the up key jumps, but if we're on a ladder, then it's different. So at the very beginning here, we're going to set up a new test. And so we're going to go to Control, and we're going to test for an object at the very top. If there's a ladder present at 0, 0 relative, then we're on a ladder. Okay, so let's put a set of blocks here. And if there's a ladder there, we want to check our position, check if it's free, if there's no collision at 0, -3, 3 pixels above us. Okay? And if 3 pixels above us is free, then let's go ahead and jump 0 on X, 3 pixels up on Y, -3 on Y, relative. And did I make this relative? Yeah. Okay. So if we're touching a ladder, and if 3 pixels up is free, go ahead and jump 3 pixels up. Else, okay, else, in other words, we're not touching a ladder, go ahead and do the normal test we were doing. In other words, if you're touching the ground, go ahead and jump. Set the vertical speed, -10. So that's the idea. Anytime the user hits up, we first check if there's a ladder, and if so, we check if they can climb. And if they can climb, we move. Okay? If we check for the ladder and it's not there, then we check to see if they're touching the ground, and if they are, we let them jump. Make sense? Okay. Now, we got to add a new key, because if you're on the ladder, you need to be able to climb down. So we need a down keyboard event. So keyboard down. And if they hit down, we need to check if there's a ladder. So check if there's an object ladder at 0, 0 relative to the player. And if so, check if we are collision free at 0, +3, which is 3 pixels down from our position relative. So 0, 3. And if that position is collision free, then we know we can climb down. So let's go jump position and 0 on X, positive 3 on Y relative. Okay? And that's all there is to it. Okay, actually that's all for the keyboard events. Let's go ahead and jump into the room and make some objects we can climb over. So I'll go to my room here, and what I'm going to do is first of all set my grid to 8 by 8 because that'll make it easier when I want to place things like ladders. So I'm gonna make a ladder, and I'm gonna make it. Oops, let me undo that. Click here, 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 here. And I'm gonna move this bird a little bit so I can keep my ladder climbing. Let me zoom in a little bit here so you can see what's happening. Whoops. Okay, and you can make your ladder climb as high as you want to. And then if you turn off your objects, you can put in your tiles, and you can pick, tiles like this. And you can repeat, and you can use different, different tiles. And for the sake of speed, I'll just do that. Okay, now if I turn off my objects with the magnifying glass here, you can see there's a vine that the player will be able to climb up on. Okay, and then also, we'll zoom out, and I'm going to place some blocks here for the player to climb up on. Okay, there's one, and I'll put one right there, and one right there, and right there. I'm recording a tutorial, so are people going to be coming in now? Is it time? Yeah. Shoot, I'm going to need to pause this. Okay, so as I build this ramp here, I need to cover these with blocks. But like I said before, the big block would create a collision even in these empty squares here and not just on that block. So that's why we have our other block, which is block H, and I can place that right here and right here and right here and here and here. Oops, and now we have a block that covers that ramp, okay? Also, there are some tiles that have kind of a hangover, hangover was a bad choice of words. The grass kind of hangs over the side of this graphic here. So let me draw an example of that real quick. Okay, so to properly cover these, what I want to use then is we use the big block for the middle, and then we'll use the vertical block here and here. And that allows this grass to hang over, but you would actually fall off of that. So rather than have kind of this artificial surface that you can walk out on, you can walk to the edge, but if you get too close to that curving grass that's coming over the edge, then you'll fall down. So that's how you'd want to use those blocks. I'm going to take a second and delete all these extra markers here. And I'll go ahead and put that flying bird back in right there. Okay, let's save this and I'll test that just to make sure that all the... Before you go any farther, I realized I left something out here. On the block V, it needs to be solid, so make sure you check that. On block H, same thing, it needs to be solid, so check solid and then click OK. Object block is a solid object, it's just not visible, and that's why we want block V and block H to be. We made block V and block H to be children of block. In other words, block is their parent, but the parent property doesn't also transmit solidity. So your solid objects don't automatically have solid children. You have to check that box. Okay, so now if I test this, and I can walk up this ramp, whereas before it would have been treated like a wall there. I can walk up the ramp. And gravity handles the down walking, by the way. That's why we don't need to do any work there. As we move forward, we just fall. That's fine. Okay, and this little block here, if I walk to the edge here, see I fall off, and I'm actually still there by the grass. Well, you could even make that more extreme if you wanted to. He's still kind of floating in the air a little bit, but you can see as she goes over the edge, she's covering up the grass there, so she's kind of in that zone. That's good. Okay, so I'm going to jump up here, and when I touch the ladder, notice that the sprite changes, and I can climb up and get to the top there, and I can climb up, I can fall, and I can grab the ladder again. So everything's working as it should. Let's jump out of here. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about for today is how to use a view. And a view is basically how you present your rooms to the player. And so it's kind of it's a tool. It's another way to change the game. You can use it to make the game more challenging or have a different style. But here's how it works. We'll go to the Views tab. And the first thing we're going to do is check Enable Use of Views. We're going to select View 0, okay, and we're going to say it's visible when the room starts. Okay, now we have two sections here. We have View in Room and we have Port on Screen, and they're both set to 640 by 480. The view in the room is your limiting window. It's this little window that lets you see into the size of the room. Port on Screen refers to how big the object is, how big the game looks on your screen. If you make it too big, it gets all pixelated and things like that. There's another way to change that. You can either use Port on Screen or you can go to the global settings and change the scale property, which we'll do in a minute here. For now, just to see how these work, let's change these numbers. Let's go to the View in Room and let's change it to 300 by 200. You see the square that shows up? That's going to be the size of our view. Now right now it's positioned in the top left corner, so that would be a horrible way to play the game because our character would be out of the view and we wouldn't see her. So what we do to compensate for that is change object following to object character. And now when the game starts, this window will find the character and center up on the character as much as it can. Now once it does that, it's going to follow, so we have a little screen that follows the character. But we don't want the character to get too close to the edge, because then it becomes ridiculous. Somebody could fly in and a monster could walk in, and if you're standing right at the edge here, the monster would just kill you instantly and you wouldn't see it coming. That's not really fair. So we need to give a little bit of a buffer area here so that the view stays a little bit in front and a little bit behind the player at all times. And that's what the H bore and V bore are for, horizontal border and vertical border. So let's go ahead and double these to 64 and 64. And you might want to change these later. That's fine to change these and experiment and see what works best. For horizontal speed and vertical speed, that refers to the speed that the view catches up with your player. So for those, we're going to change those to 4. Okay. Now, just to show you what this looks like, I'm going to save it and run it. And here's what we get. Okay. So you can see it's a little bit more of a challenge. You can't see everything. Like when the game starts, you don't know where the end of the level is. And so you got to come over here and you have to take a risk and jump across there. Oh, there it is. So that can be something that's good. It could be something that can be used not very well as well. So be careful with that. All right, now let's go back in there and let's go to views. And if I change the port on screen to 300 by 200, watch what happens now. We get a tiny game, which maybe that's what you like, maybe it's not. So that's just something to consider. Everything is much smaller now, except for the screen. That part is the top 10 score. High score window is full sized. So another way to compensate for that is to go to the resources menu and go down to change global game settings, and we can do the fixed scale and change it to 200%. Okay, so that's an option for adjusting that. Let's go ahead and click OK on that, and just to show you, we'll test this out. And now you can see it's kind of the same as the other effect. So, it's however you want to do it. It has kind of the same effect. Okay, that's it for phase 4. In our last phase, we're going to do a number of things. In phase 5, we'll be adding bullets and ammunition and the ability to shoot bullets at enemies, and also a score screen that'll keep track of things like number of lives and all kinds of stuff. So we'll kind of round out all the things the player can do in phase 5.